You're listening to the Freio Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
My name is Michelle Pietrafitta. I play the drums with the band and also do most of the booking.
My name's Jason Bertone. I play the double bass in the band.
My name is Thom Lafond, and I play guitar and sing in the band. And I write songs.
Well, Jason, I wanted to ask, for those who don't know, tell me about a double bass.
A double bass could be also called upright bass, or a string bass, or a doghouse bass if you want to go like real rockabilly with it. Yeah, it's bigger. I think it sounds really nice. My bandmates agree, hopefully. Yeah,
it sounds nice.
Well, one of the things that's really great about the double bass is there's two ways of playing it. You can pluck it, like you would like a bass guitar, but you also play with the bow. So it has a little bit extra, a little something.
Cool. And is it electric or acoustic?
Mine is electric. It hooks up through I have it hooked up through. I actually have like going through two pickups at this point. I'm kind of doing something interesting with this band. We have a unique blend of music, and I think it's worthy of a unique bass tone. So put some work in on that. I'm sure that like there's like some like classical musicians who may listen to it and be like, that's not really being a double bassist what you're doing, but I'm going to count it. They don't get a vote.
Cool. So you got a DI or direct in coming out. And where are your pickups? I'm just curious. We'll dive into it and then we'll pick apart everybody else's.
I have a magnetic pickup at the end of the fingerboard. It's made by Crevo Pickups. Jason Crevo Flores in Portland, Oregon makes them. Yeah, he's designed a really well-made magnetic pickup for double bass. And I'm in the process of starting to blend in. I play an Eminence portable double bass. It's like a slimmer body instrument, and I use the built-in gauge realist pickup that sits underneath the bridge foot. One is more for the bow. One is more for plucking. I'm kind of. We have this time when we're not where we're not performing. We've been fortunate that we're actually getting to perform, but in the process of I had like an opportunity to work on my gear, work on my technique. This is a sneakily great time for musicians who like to practice and like to work on new things. So I'm making the best out of that in this.
Absolutely. Oh, I agree with that, and I'm glad that you guys are taking, I'll say the opportunity to, work on other things that you otherwise couldn't if you were super busy on the road or traveling. I'm just curious, do you manually switch over those inputs when you switch to a bow in a live setting, or is this just for studio?
I am working on that currently. The next time y'all get to see Banshee Tree when we go on tour, I'll hopefully have this worked out. I have, I've been experimenting with a new preamp. It's made by a Canadian company called Radial. It's called the Bassbone OD. It is a blending switching box. I'm trying to figure that out. Me and Nick, our violinist, who unfortunately isn't able to be here today, his other job is he's a sound technician and engineer by his like other trade. So we've been trying to figure out what's the best thing to be for, when we actually get started playing shows again. I think that's like regularly it's going to clarify what I need to do. Yeah. But right now I've been trying to use it as a switching box, because as I'm saying, you have two ways of playing the instrument. Kind of what it likes going through a speaker system can be kind of different. So
absolutely
working on it. This is a fun thing that I've wanted to do for years, but it's always been, we've been fortunate in that we've been busy, and we've had sometimes we play shows with other bands or playing on festival stages, and we just need to, you you want to get the bass done on the sound check in a minute, 2 minutes. Don't want to really take up all the band sound check time trying to figure out the third or fourth bass tone that you're going to use. So, you know, now the time now. So hey,
Thom, I wanted to jump over to your instrument, and so you started the band, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, I did in 2013. When I first came out to Colorado, I was living in my car and camping a lot, and so the only thing I really had was this guy for playing on the street, something like that. And I just wanted to, I street performed a lot. And so the band kind of grew out of street performing. And then that led to like playing a lot of like swing dances and events like that and all kinds of stuff like weird festivals. And that's about the time Jason joined the band. And then the washboard player quit band and Michelle joined the band. So we went from being an acoustic, kind of more street busking band, but it was always, the band's always been kind of like built around songs and having some lyrics. And like in the last 3 years, it's been like amazing to have this group of 3 other musicians like basically take me on a journey of like, oh, where is these like lyrics and songs like going, you know? And we just got out of the studio, so I'm the most excited I ever have been about it because everyone did such an awesome job like playing. And I was awesome. I don't know. I'm really proud of everybody, and like, yeah. So right now I'm feeling really, really groovy, and I'm actually just sitting here in my room where I record tons of music, and I'm working on the vocals right now for the album.
Now that's not a regular guitar. I don't really see those at a shop.
This is the resonator guitar. It's very loud. So when I couldn't afford to eat, it like handed me bread. Because when you're on the street playing music, people are like, oh, we give you no bread if we cannot hear you. And so I was louder, and then I brought more friends along, and then, yeah. And I was in a jazz orchestra before I moved here, and I played, they made me play banjo, and I'm not really good at banjo, but like play like swing style jazz guitar stuff, but on a banjo. And so I was like in my head, like, oh, this is hard the whole time. And then I got this thing, and it basically does all the work of what a banjo would. I would demonstrate, but Zoom music does not really carry very well.
Yeah, no, that's not fair. Yeah. That's, so where did you pick it up?
This guitar, I got that in my hometown in Albany, New York. I have another one that's like it.
That's a cool looking one too.
Well, I will demonstrate just because it's so funky, but only a few seconds.
Oh, that sounds old. It sounds like classic.
Yeah, and this thing's from the 50s. It has a social security number of someone who I think is dead, carved into the back. But it's from the 50s. Belonged to Robbie Schaefer. There's a Robbie Schaefer out there. If you're dead, beyond the grave. I really enjoy playing your guitar. Thank you for letting me get to a pawn shop at some point.
That's awesome. So, Michelle, I want to dive into what you bring to the band. Tell me a little bit about your setup.
Well, I play drums, obviously, and I play a Pro Masters with a bunch of Zildjian cymbals. I always seem to be drawn to the Zildjian cymbals, so I've got a bunch of those. I just got 70s new beat Zildjian hi-hats, which are like, I feel like I finally found a pair of hi-hats that I absolutely love. It's taken me 16 years to find them, but I'm finally happy. So yeah, I have that. It's a 4-piece kit, so 1 up, 1 down, snare drum, 20-inch kick. I just got another kit that's more like a jazz fusion kit with a smaller kick drum, and so I'll be using that one as well. I've been doing a lot of kind of kick, snare, hi-hat, I guess like funky hip-hop kind of work. I've been focusing kind of in that direction, so the smaller setup is really fun for me.
Tell me about like what makes a perfect hi-hat or like the ideal hi-hat from your perspective. What makes it stand out?
For me personally, I like to have I like the chick sound. So I look for one that has a really strong chick and it doesn't have a bunch of how would you say this, Tom? Like how would you put like a sound wave that's not all over the place?
It's smooth.
Like,
you want it, she wants like a tight fundamental tone with less overtones.
Yeah.
So she wants just that high frequency, which is probably around like 8,000 to 20K, and it's like, or probably not that had too many overtones. But then without all the other like lower sounds and all, sometimes in a hi-hat you'll have a ringing like that happens, and then when you kick down it goes to like, and that gets really annoying when you're recording. But like a lot of drummers never even notice that frequency is happening. But Michelle notices, and she cares a lot about how her music sounds. So she got these fancy hi-hats before we went in the studio that are just like a really clean, like she said.
Well, it's so important to get the right sound when you go into the studio so that you don't have to sit there and fight it in post-production.
Not even just in the studio, but live too, because I feel like hi-hats can take over volume-wise if you're not careful with how they sound and picking ones that kind of blend with the kind of music that you're playing.
So I want to back up a little bit and talk about like your early careers. I'll start it with you, Tom. Just tell me about like how you got into music and then ultimately how you decided to jump in, and start the band.
To be honest, the band kind of came together out of survival. Me and my friend were traveling together, and we were on the road, and we needed to get enough gas to get the next spot. So we started singing together, and then she picked up the washboard, and we kind of just like had this kind of thing. So that's how the band originally started. But I came to the table with that with a bunch of songs that I had written when I was a teenager, and I started playing guitar when I was 9, and I started really getting into songwriting and like keeping my songs when I was about 15. And I still play a lot of the songs I wrote, like, back then too, some in the band. And recently I've been trying to write newer songs. So I don't play those ones. It's crazy. I played them for so long, but I would just want to keep trying to expand it.
What about you, Jason? Tell me about your early music path.
When I was about 13, I decided that I wanted to be in a punk band. And that was kind of my lens. Oh, I'm going to like learn how to play some instruments now. I started a band, played punk shows. I like wrote songs in the style of basically just like sped up Alice in Chains tunes. I did that for a couple years. I wanted to be a writer when I was younger. I kept on getting pulled back into music when I was in college. I became interested in jazz, and I started playing the double bass. I moved to New York after finishing college. Again, wanting to write, I wrote for a small music magazine for a while, and it didn't seem like it was a very good fit. And as I was kind of figuring out what I was going to do with my life, I just started getting more gigs and playing more music. I started, bluegrass music was very popular in New York at the time, weirdly enough. And it was around like 2010, 2011. And yeah, I just started playing a lot of gigs, and I kept playing a lot of gigs. I was working for a photography company, just like in the studio. I had enough gigs to quit. I, would do anything, singer-songwriter gigs, like kind of bar gigs and out in the suburbs. Did music in Central Park for like 6 months. That was great. And yeah, I just kind of used that, and I took lessons from anybody I could get a lesson from. I listened to a lot of music, and I just kind of, lived it for a while. And when I moved to Colorado in 2000, beginning of 2016. And when I moved to Colorado, I met Thom like almost immediately. I met Thom like within the first like couple of weeks after being here. Our friend, my friend David Tiller, he plays in a great band called Tarka. If you ever have the opportunity to check them out, I would highly recommend. I met him at a bluegrass jam because I just didn't really know anybody in Colorado, so I just went to a bluegrass jam. It seemed like the thing to do, and we started talking, and he was like, yeah, you know, I see that you're not like really a bluegrass guy. I'm not really a bluegrass guy. I know this I know this band that's looking for a bass player. You might fit in, and you know, we played a gig together, and it was just like a chart gig. And it was like Thom had this of old swing charts that he had obviously written out by hand and transcribed. So I was like, oh, this is great. This is he's interested in weird things that I'm also interested in. So it was a good fit. And you know, that was over 4 years ago now.
And so, Jason, real quick, I'm just curious, were you taking photos in that photography gig that you had?
No. I was,
oh, you're just working.
It was like the undergraduate school I went to was well known for its photography program. And my girlfriend at the time, one of her friends was working there, and they like needed somebody just to do like general like studio work, like setting up lighting rigs and answering the phone and running messages and all that. And because of the school I went to, they just hired me.
When you were writing, was there a particular area that you were interested in? Creative writing, fiction? I don't know. What were you into? Poetry?
I had done an academic thesis on jazz music during the Cold War, and I was interested in doing social science. And I wanted to go to graduate school for ethnomusicology at one point. It's, I guess kind of along, and one of the reasons I wanted to be more involved with music was to kind of bolster my credential for that. As I kind of kept going with music performance, it kept on just going, and you know, it just seemed like fate.
Michelle, tell me a little bit about your early adventures in music and how you got into the game.
So when I was a kid, probably around 8 years old or so, I used to like torture my neighbors by singing the same song over and over and over, like over the fence to all my neighbors every day, all day. And so eventually my mom was like, well, do you want to take voice lessons? And at the time, I didn't even realize that was the thing you could do. I was like, wait, I can like study this? And it's not just like this fun, awesome thing I get to do. And so I started taking classical voice lessons as a kid, and I was just doing like Italian arias and like, you know, very classical stuff. And then as I got into my teenage years and I was still doing that, and I kind of like started going down, I guess you could say, a bad path, or what my parents viewed as a bad path. And so there was a school called School of Rock that had opened up in my area, and my mom was presented to me. I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. So I joined this school and discovered the drums through this. I didn't start playing drums till I was 16. But then through that, I became completely obsessed, and you know, my mom's trick worked. All my friends were in the school, and so we just jammed, play music all day, and it gave me like a real purpose. And I had never had anything in my life before that was just like I was immediately so driven. I was just like, I'm going to practice 3 hours a day, every day, and that doesn't count the songs I'm learning. And so like I would run home from school and like learn Metallica albums and Black Sabbath albums and all that. That's kind of where my roots are, and just copy them. And eventually I went to college and studied music. And I actually met Thom there in New York. We know each other from way back in the day. And so I played through school and then moved out here a couple years after college. And I feel like that's really where my real studying began, because I started seeking out my own mentors and teachers and teaching myself how to practice in like a real like focused kind of way, where before it was just kind of like I was focused, but it was more scattered. So I got serious and started booking tours, and then eventually joined Banshee Tree. Was it 3 years ago now? And
August of 3 years.
Just 3 years.
Just 3 years, yeah.
Just about 3 years around this time, actually. This was around the time you would have played.
August,
Yeah, September was your first show. September 30th was Andy Thorne's wedding.
Which was my first show with these guys. So I was like, I'm sticking with this band. And lucky to come in with these guys because they already had kind of a presence, and they were very open to my like weird musical tastes, and we just kind of like, the chemistry opened up, and they were really open to like kind of going in whatever direction the four of us went together. And so I just started booking on full-on tours with this band, and it's pushed me in so many ways.
I have something about that. I think like the smartest thing we ever did as a band was we had our former bandmates who played the washboard had left the group, and she was great, you know, she just didn't want to be in the band anymore, you know, legit, it's fine. And we basically had a choice whether we could have like hired somebody to do her job, we could have like hired a new one of her, or we could have brought in another musician who was going to push the band in a new direction and really have input on where the group went. And we weren't just going to be like a kind of like dark sounding swing band anymore. We were going to be our own type of music. I think that's when the band really started to get legs as something that was like truly unique and very interesting. So that was a very good confluence of things that happened for us. I'm glad we had, I'm glad we found a musician who wanted to do that road with us, but I'm also glad we kind of reached a little higher in that moment.
Michelle, I don't want to go down any paths that you don't want to, but I'm a little curious. I mean, it seems like music was a transformational journey for you. Like you were going down path A, and then music brought you down a different path. I'm curious. Do you still see it that way, or?
Yeah. I mean, music, the arts in general. So any kind of art that you play, it's really, if you commit to it and stick with it, it's going to be one of the best, but also one of the hardest things in your life, because it's basically like looking into a mirror, and you constantly have to assess like who you are and process who you are and what you're doing through this medium. And so it allows you to do that, and also forces you to go through that. And that's what music does for me, you know, so many times coming up against this like feeling like I'm not good enough, or feeling like whatever I go through, music is there to help me. But it also shows me all of the things that I need to work on in myself in order to really produce good music. So it's helped me a lot in that way throughout my whole life. And then initially when I was a kid, you know, I could have been just like kind of a loser. I grew up with like the people I was surrounding with myself with just kind of like got high all the time and drunk and like partied. And I thought that was cool when I was a kid. And when I found music, it was like all of a sudden I realized that there was a whole bunch of people who are actually passionate about something that can make you better. And then I started surrounding myself with people who were passionate about this thing that was bigger than what we are individually. So
you talked about music being a mirror for yourself to self-reflect, but in a way you're opening yourself up to the world and for other people to judge that image in the mirror. And you know, I know a lot of kids today are dealing with social media, and there's new challenges that arise. I'm curious about a little bit how you deal with others' interpretation of yourself but still maintaining, you know, a true identity.
That's part of the mirror thing, right? So you're very aware of other people looking at you. So you're like, well, I have to get my shit together. Can I say that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Felt like it is.
Cool. You're like
family program.
When you learn how to play music live, perform live, you're doing it in front of people. You want to improve yourself and be the best you can be, and also you want to present. People are watching you. You want to be the best person you can be, and it's very hard to sustain inauthenticity. So you really have to. It brings up all the things that you're like, oh my goodness, if people were paying attention to me, do I want them to see that? And you say, I have to work on that on myself. So in a way, it's helpful. But also we have to be careful and kind of set boundaries around allowing what other people think of us to drive what we do as far as presenting what we believe in. So you do kind of have to be strong in that. And, it's hard because people are going to say stuff, but you have to me, it's just consistently coming back to who you are and grounding yourself in that. And, it gets easier as long as you don't let what other people say drive your decisions.
I like that differentiation between like the driver but also being receptive to it, but not letting it drive. And I want to just highlight one thing that you said, which I find to be very interesting and counter intuitive to some people. And that is that music brought you away from the drugs and alcohol. So a lot of people, associate particular artists are very open with drugs and alcohol, but it's not necessarily. It's that direction with music, and by pursuing music, you pursued perhaps a more healthy life.
I think that to get really good at something, you kind of have to keep your shit tight. You have to keep it clean and stay focused. Otherwise, you can get good at something, but it's going to be a lot harder if you're just like high all the time.
I think drugs and music in general are like such a trap, because you're gonna be the way the music industry is structured, like you're around alcohol at minimum you're around alcohol constantly. So it's figuring out how you're going to exist in this world and how you're gonna remain authentic to what you want to do as an artist while existing in a world that, can be really dark, and there's that way of looking at it, but it can also be really fun. It can be too much fun, and that becomes the danger, and that becomes the trap, because, it's really, when you're getting on stage, it's really easy to forget that you missed the drop in for this one section because you're drunk and everybody's clapping and nobody's bringing it up because you're having more drinks after the show. So, it's like, it can be fun, but it can get into that sort of level of self-reflection that you need to be clear-eyed about when you're trying to make good art, which is what we're trying to do ultimately.
I quit drinking a year and a few months ago for that exact reason.
Nice.
To stay clear-headed and to produce more art. And ever since, I've been making way more stuff. And I don't wake up and spend half of my day trying to reclaim my morning that already went by already. Well,
I think it's a very positive message, and not everybody's open about it. So thank you all for discussing it and just being open.
If I knew a song with all I was able, deep in my palms like a wave to the rocks, I see you running fierce with the teeth of a sable. You're at my window with the skeleton stars, right as you stand in my new set of skin. Smell breaking it in when you find me up there. The sound doesn't stop, it's only taking a hostage in the silence that lives above the moving air. One and one another gone, 3 stars in the sky, trace fades when
I want to talk about a little bit more into your music, your body of work. And I know that you guys have got some stuff, and you just mentioned that you got out of the recording studio, which is super exciting. Definitely talk about that. But Hard Winds, I want to chat about that one real quick.
That was one of the songs. I lived out in a cabin in Ward, Colorado, and there's no electricity because the solar panel got ripped off the roof and thrown into the yard.
The wind blew it off?
The wind blew it off. Yeah, it broke the steel bars, and I couldn't afford another solar panel, so it just stayed that way. That was pretty early on into moving this cabin. I stayed there for 2.5 years. I was sitting in the cabin one day, and the wind was rocking out so hard, and I had a Ricky Martin song stuck in my head, and I couldn't get it out. And I didn't know what song it was, but like it sounded like maybe Ricky Martin was somewhere in there, just like giving me a guitar groove. And yeah, so I just kind of went in for some words about the forces of wind, and then the comforts of familiarity, and then there's also this kind of idea of like aliens coming down and kidnapping people that's in there. It's all kind of interspliced. I don't really write in a direct story form that much, especially with this band, because a lot of these songs I wrote, now that was like, 5 years ago. So, but yeah, that one is kind of just a indirect kind of personal story. There's a verse in there about writing songs and hiding away from everybody, and actually about quarantining, which is something I was already kind of interested in before coronavirus, getting away from people, deep past time. And so I would, there's one verse about isolation. And then I always wanted it to be kind of a rock feel. I used to play this kind of like a tango feel, and then like tried to do like a Cubano style, or like a slow rumba on it. And Jason was in the band when we were playing around with it like that. But then Michelle joined the band, and she's like, I don't want to do no rumba. And I was like, I've always wanted this backbeat. And actually, I recorded the song with the acoustic group a long time ago, but I ended up playing drums and having an organ player and stuff, and we did it with like a backbeat idea, because I always felt like it needed more energy than like this like imitation of a different style of music. I always wanted to hear like this fusion of kind of like rumba rhythms mixed with this kind of like electric rock sound. And then Jason added his spice of the upright bass, and Nick added his parts and stuff. And that's how that song came together. Great. We also recorded it pretty much live. We thought we were just going to make a live demo, and then we kept those tracks and send them off to a mixing guy, and our friend, the guy who's going to mix this album for our upcoming album too. So we just took kind of almost like a rough sketch of a demo, like all playing live, and we sent it. And that's how we're doing our album too, is like the tracking, like it's as much live tracking as possible. And
are you guys in the same room when you're tracking? Are you in isolation booths or studio?
And then we couldn't keep the vocals though. That's the only thing. But we are in we're in like, there's some isolation. The fiddle was isolated, the guitar amp was isolated, and the instrument, like Jason had a direct input only from his bass, so that was isolated.
The bass amp was isolated too.
So all the amps are, but we were in the same room together, but all the sounds were isolated.
So you're running it all through a mixer and just recording it straight into DAW? Or?
No, that was we went to a great studio called Silo Sound, and I think it was actually one of the last recordings that was made at that location of the studio, because he packed up his stuff. But he had headphone amps for us, so we could control our own individual mixes while we were recording. That was really handy. So, we can really get in the zone, and basically, I know we all like to mix and get our sound where we want it. We're like, oh wait, that part's distracting me, let's cut that out. And but yeah, it was a great studio with tons of preamping, and he was just recording in Pro Tools.
It's Todd DeBell is how you pronounce his last name. Mm-hmm. It's like, I can't say enough good things about him. He did a really great job. He did a great job curating that that session, and wherever he goes next, like, keep an eye out for him, because he's the man as far as I'm concerned.
Agree.
And also we want to shout out to a guy named John Weber, who in the beginning of quarantine was like, hey, if when you guys feel comfortable getting together as a group, which took us it took us 2 months before we were at that point. But he's like, when you do, I want to, help you guys put out your album. And so he put like a great deal of help into making it possible for us to do this. And so we're like eternally thankful for John, because we were like, oh my God, how do we survive this thing? And he's like, you guys have time to make an album, and here's some resources. And it's amazing. And yeah, he's just like a really inspirational dude, the way he sees music and the world and how it's like helping us out. It's unreal, and we're so grateful.
Let's jump into the new album. I believe, by my own ear and own assessment, I think that Hard Winds was like an evolution. It sounds different than In the Company of Crows.
Yes.
Yeah. And is it a stepping stone? Is it closer? Is the new album similar?
Company of Crows doesn't have any of these members in the band in it. It was just me and my friend on washboard, and I played all the other instruments on it. And I had a keyboard player come in and a bassist come in on one track, Chris Duffy from the Magic Beans. So that album actually has hardly anything to do with this band, other than we play some of those songs in a completely different way now.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm very confused by us.
Yeah, I don't want to take it down though, because it's art that I made with my friend Kaylin back in the day, and I can't.
Absolutely, it's an evolution. Let's chat about what you guys are currently doing with the difference in the sound, and what you're working on, and maybe when it's going to be released.
Well, I guess I'll speak a little bit on it. Yeah, so when I first joined the band, it was crazy. I had actually never experienced it. We had this weekly gig at License Number 1 every single Saturday in Boulder. And when I first started playing with them, like, swing dancers were showing up. Like, it was a swing dance. Like, there was like they knew what they were doing. They were really good swing dancers, tons of them. And I was like, what is this? This is so cool. I've never been a part of this before. And but as we started playing more, our sound evolved, and Thom and I had been kind of in jam bands in New York, like in the same scene. And so it was like this electricity when we reconnected. We were like, oh yeah, this is what we used to do. And we started getting like really weird and more kind of like the rock style and more experimental, I would say.
I stopped bringing this to the gig.
Yeah.
No more.
The gig and started bringing PRS. Yeah, so delay, and yeah, we just like it snowballed. We just got weirder and weirder and started experimenting, and like the license thing went from a swing dance. Slowly the swing dancers stopped coming, and the crowd turned into like this like jam band dancing, like rocking out crowd. It was really, really cool to see. But yeah, it happened pretty quickly, and we've been finally, I feel like, especially with this new album now, coming into like a comfortability with the sound where we're kind of like chilling out and figuring out the forms and like allowing the vocals and the vocal melodies to shine forward. And that's been the evolution from my perspective.
I feel like yeah, you just framed the whole history so well. Like, we connected the electricity. I'll just really quick, the 3 basic gear changes that happened is I went from plugging directly into the mixer with an acoustic jazz guitar without even a preamp. I used to just go straight in, and I liked the sound. I carried one thing to the gig. It was clean. Not that clean, but and then so I switched over to bring in electric guitar, a delay pedal, and a distortion pedal. And then Jason switched over to using an octave pedal on his bass and a little bit of EQ. Nick switched before we were basically acoustic, and Nick switched to using a delay and an octave whammy pedal, like what Tom Morello uses to get those kind of like squeaky, hingy sounds. And so that was like we basically went full electric after buying 6 pedals. Yeah. And added Michelle to the band. But the new album, though, it feels like what Michelle's saying. It's like we've found a way to let the songs be songs. And even Todd in the studio was really, really encouraging in the idea of that, like, we don't need to showcase all this instrumental stuff all the time, like finding a tight way to do it. And we had been rehearsing for months. As soon as we found out we were going to be making an album and there was funding for it, we were like, we're going to get together every day and take this really seriously. And we practiced, like, how do we make these vocals come through? I wasn't even singing with a microphone at rehearsals. We're like just trying to figure out how do we, make this vibe feel so comfortable and make the groove comfortable where, like, words can kind of flow on top of them. And like when we rock and we play instrumentals, we really mean it because we've been waiting.
Thom, I want to jump into some of your lyrics a little bit. Obviously, I don't know what's on the upcoming album, and so I'm just curious how you go about writing your lyrics. Is it kind of a free flow of mind? Is it, maybe you're inspired one day and you sit down and write the whole song? Or is it kind of you pick words here and there and paste them together over time?
Sounds like you heard all my songs, man. You got it. That's exactly how I do it.
Both?
Honestly, I've been evolved more towards that recently. I used to be more like I'd keep a song as like my song baby, and I would work on it for months and months and think that anything that was good needed all this work. Yet I still had one or two songs. One of them's To the Moon, a song we still play I wrote when I was like 15. Whatever. And I still have that freaking song, and we still play it. And that one came out like instantly, just in a flow. And then I like crafted and worked so hard on these songs. And actually a lot of those ones I worked the most on have been abandoned in terms of this recording process. Even though we play them as a band, we're focused more on stuff that's more current. And I've been writing some of the songs are like, I wrote the lyrics 1 year, and then 5 years later wrote the rest of the lyrics and completely I like to rewrite my stuff. Even that today I'm going through and I have like 5 different vocal takes that I like that I took, and they all have different lyrics and the phrases start at different spots. I just took all the ones I like and I can't make up my mind. So maybe I'll just go in and write some new ones that are better than all of them. And that's how I feel about recording, is like if I can't figure it out, like I'm just like, I'm going to try again and go for something better. And I heard some Michael Jackson outtakes, and I was so stoked because like he's doing something similar where he doesn't try to strive for perfection on something that he knows. He just does like a different take in a different style. It's like he sounds like a jazz singer, and then he sounds really, really like dancey, like himself, like really exaggerated. And then another one is more like raspy. He's like tried all these different tones on his outtakes, and hearing that kind of inspires me to like. Studio is playing around, like we're trying to, like, you're listening, you're hearing, you're really trying to find something. You're on a journey. You're trying to complete the journey of finding the sound for the words and the vibe and the feeling. So I'm writing new stuff now, and I also I have a notepad in my car. I take voice memos, and I just record while I'm driving down the canyon, and I just improvise for the 15 minutes it takes for me to get to the town. Sometimes it takes a half an hour. Sometimes there's a long light. And I just improvise, and then I go through with a notebook and I just pull out every phrase that like made me feel something that I liked, and I like this way it sounded coming out of my mouth. Also, the Rolling Stones did something similar where they just went like, oh yeah, oh yeah, like to a melody, and then like they went back and they're like, I think it said something like about like this blah 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 that, like in there, like when you were mumbling, I heard these words forming that shape, and like the idea of the like mouth shape and the way the word leaves the mouth is more important to me than connecting a story. It's more that like each line feels like a mood and imagery, and so yeah, it has to like feel good to sing it. And so I'm taking songs that I had before, and I'm like, I sang them for 10 years, but they could feel better to sing than this, and so I'm trying to figure it out.
How do you deal with the songs that you've worked so hard on and it's just not there? It's not up to par or up to your level, and or somebody else critiques it. Like, do you accept that critique, or do you just stay true to yourself? How do you deal with all those outtakes? I'm
a constant oversharer, and I'm struggling to get as much critique as I can all the time. And any advice I can get on my songs, like, critique to me isn't something like my art in my direction is like whatever I feel like, But like probably most of my best ideas are someone hearing something I had and then showing me what it could be, and how to clean it up or how to change it or how to make it. Like music for me is like the art of getting, like with songwriting, it's like the art of getting through to someone in their heart and their emotions and their feelings. Like if the chords are the emotion, even if the lyrics mean nothing and the chords convey the emotion, like there's like getting through is the result. So even if I made someone like be like, I don't like this, I still got through to them, so I'm stoked. I don't care, you know.
That's cool.
Thom likes to change things around a lot. Like I've never had a thing with you where you've come to it and you've been like, this is the song, this is how we're doing it. It is set in stone. Like you never have any issue wanting to change things up or re-examining of things, which is really cool. It's different from other songwriters I've worked with, who, you know, a lot of people are like, this is sacred. I've done it. I've put all the thought in. This conversation's over. You know, like.
Yeah, I will say that too. I think it's something that's important to share with people who are interested in doing this, because Tom's songwriting is amazing, and for like anybody who's trying to get into that, who might look at that and be like, oh, that seems so hard to put yourself out there, or like what I write is so important to me. He is like hungry for people to tell him what's wrong so that he can fix it to make it as good as it can possibly be. So I think it's really good to be open to critique, to be able to kind of pick apart, like, and sometimes you can see if critique is coming from the right place. But if it is coming from a good and knowledgeable place, or if somebody's telling you, well, this doesn't make me feel something, and the point of music is to make you feel something, well, you want that feedback, because you want to kind of calibrate it and craft something that makes people feel something. So that feedback is important.
Absolutely. And I wonder, like, when is that point, that inflection point, when the creativity and open-mindedness needs to start to close down in order for you to stamp out a song and like, this is our song, we're going to push publish, and now we'll move on.
There's two things that are the most important for me, and one of them is the energy level from the beginning of the song to the end. The first 3 seconds of the song, the last bit of the song, I mean the chorus, those things, like the energy, the flow between all those things is like really what makes, if you start with that when you record, you'll know what you're recording. And so like to me that's like a sign that it's done, is because there's no questions about that. It's just like, oh, it flowed through. And we had that experience when we were rehearsing all together and all mutually coming up with arrangements for the album. And a lot of it was reductionist. We took like these long arrangements, and we're like, how do we compress these down? How do you trim anything that makes the song feel longer and it stretches out experiential time? Let's cut that. We don't need it. We don't need anything that makes it feel dragging. We don't need anything that feels like it's reiterating too much, unless the reiterating is the music. Like sometimes a catchy chorus that repeats. Reiteration is part of what trance music. It's what makes it good. But like there's like section to section stuff that happens, and if it feels like something comes in and it takes up a whole 20 seconds or 40 seconds, you got to really question its intention and why is it there. And you know, and then the other thing is that the vocals gotta sound like, and the lyrics have to sound like crispy to me. There's like a point where I'm like, ooh, it sounds crispy, and then I'm down. But I like it. It doesn't usually ever. I've only really been able to record like 2 things, and then I'm planning this. Or 3 things where I felt like the vocals were crispy. The Hard Winds song you're saying, I was really stoked. I was like, okay, I got crispy vocals. I'm gonna try for that on this. And I'm really stoked. I really believe, because the instruments are so like, they're laying the perfect bed for them. I'm just like, I'm having a really good time recording, because I'm getting like that feeling of this is finished and this is good from multiple versions, like a live take that I did just now. I'm like, oh, I like that live take. I might keep that. And I'm feeling like something's crispy before I've even processed it or thought about it too much. And so this album, I think we've just given it so much thought, and like I've been thinking about these lyrics and everything for so long that it's like one of the first times in my life I've also forced myself recently to finish stuff. I record myself every day and put it out on the internet. and I've just been like, I need to finish stuff now. So like, I have to push myself to that point of liking it as fast as possible. Not like to stress myself out, but like, there's just like an infiniteness of like, I could get better over the course of 2 weeks, or I could come up with better lyrics. But there's a point where I feel like I like it a lot, and I'm like, then I can't mess with it. I shouldn't mess with it. I should put it out. If I can't find fault with it at all, like, that's the timestamp. Then it's like, okay, maybe I'll record this 10 years from now, but I would like to timestamp this. You know, I do regret recording some of the songs that I did on the last album, like, really fast in one day, where I like played all the instruments. I would have loved to like come up with like at that point, like, oh, who to play these parts, or like bring in a bunch of friends that are talented. But instead I was just like, I'm going to track myself over and over, and kept it really simple. But like, I don't know, I regret rushing any recording, you know, but at the same time, it's like, this is your stage, it's your performance, you're in the moment. And right now I'm like trying to strike a balance, because I don't want to be taking too long. I don't want to be rushing things.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's the hardest part. You got to put something out there, and you know, you could be refining the first song you ever wrote still. And there comes a point of diminishing returns of your effort, where you're just putting effort and it's just not getting much better, or you're trying to
diminishing perspective. Your perspective of it starts getting shitty. You're like, oh, I don't like this anymore. I heard it too many times.
Oh, where you're just like in a feedback loop of your own ideas, and it starts to become hard to tell. It becomes like an echo chamber, and you can't really tell if it's good or not, because you've just been in this rabbit hole for so long.
I'll only listen to the recordings we have in the studio when I'm working on them, because I really don't want to get too comfortable with them. It's really important to me. I feel like when I'm recording, I can really only give myself like 10 like listens back. Like if I record some vocals, I don't want to listen to them yet. Like I recorded some, I felt like they were done. I'm going to let them sit for a few weeks, come back, listen to them, and be like, do I like this? And the fresh ears, you have to plan for fresh ears. You can't just like go down the rabbit hole and beat yourself down into like, you will get bogged down by your own ideas, and you'll get trapped in your perspective.
That's interesting. I like what you were saying earlier about just listening to, is any part dragging on? Like, is it just adding time? And I feel like some of my favorite songs, the first time I heard it, I'm like, oh, why did it end? It's like so good. Like, keep going. Like, let's listen to that again.
That's what we try to do.
Yeah. So some of my favorite songs are just, there's no fat, and it makes it stand out as a solid piece. It certainly cuts down the time, but I think it creates that high level of quality throughout the entirety of the song. And I'm curious, where are you publishing online on a daily basis?
I'm publishing just mostly acoustic videos and friends playing music in nature. And I'm hopefully I want to get all Banshee Tree to get up there. And on my YouTube channel, I have them as well. And I also have a whole live set on my YouTube channel of Banshee Tree playing that I filmed it for like a live stream, or like not a live premiere, not a live stream. But so if you go to my YouTube channel, I am posting every day on there. And then also, and I plan to get some more Banshee Tree content on there. We've been working mostly on the album and playing these live shows, so we haven't gotten together to do a video shoot, but that's definitely our next, it's on the docket.
And what's that YouTube channel for anybody listening?
It's Thom Lafond. It's just my name. I put stuff up every day. I film every day and put it up.
Well, I feel like that's a good forcing function that gets you to produce and stay active. And
it's kind of like vocal training for me too right now, because like I go in and I don't like the sound of my voice. If I like sing 100 songs and learn songs from my influences and try to recreate the way they feel, and like then I go back in the studio with a fresh voice, like it feels so good. Like I'm trying to find my voice while I'm recording. So recording something every day is keeping me finding my voice.
This question is really probably applicable to everybody in the band, but whoever wants to take it. And it's about like jamming, like in the moment when you're performing. You've got the structure of the song, you know what to do, but there is moments where you get this solo or just freedom of expression, and you're sometimes feeding off of somebody else. I'm curious how you guys maintain the focus and embrace the uncertainty.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So I guess as a drummer, our solos are a little bit different than everyone else's, because like, and a bass player, but like Thom is soloing every song, so so it's kind of
not on the album though.
Huh?
Not on the album though.
Well, it was in live shows, in a live setting. So, you know, when there's a drum solo, it's like there's usually like 1 moment per set or 1 moment per show, and it's like the drum solo. So at first, I hadn't really done them very much before I joined Banshee Tree. And to be honest, it scared the shit out of me because it was a lot of pressure. It was like, oh, the drum solo is happening. So all of a sudden, everyone's just looking at you and everyone's expecting you to do something really. It's like, you know, it's a moment. And it took me just doing it a lot and having the experience of allowing my fear. So it's like sink or swim. So at the very beginning, I did a lot of sinking because I would get scared. I'd be like, oh shit, okay, got to do something really cool. And then at that moment, when you're trying to do something really cool, you're probably not going to do something really cool because you're trying to like whip out your tricks or whatever, and you're not listening and responding to the moment. But then after kind of getting used to that situation, and I will say like meditation and grounding practices like that really help to kind of like be able to tune out what's going on. But as you kind of fall on your face a few times and get used to the feeling of getting back up, it becomes less of a big deal to fall. And eventually you can just tune into the music and have the confidence to be like, okay, this is my space to say something. So I'm just going to take my time and say what I want to say. And sometimes for me, that means I'll just completely stop. Like I'll stop playing for like a few seconds and just be like, I'm going to start from ground zero instead of trying to just start balls out because you know where to go. So by stopping, it's like, well, I've already stopped. So what can get, like, I can't mess up from here. And so, yeah, so it's just getting used to, one, the feeling of recovering, and, you know, the idea of like, well, I could screw up and that's okay. And then being able to decide in that moment, I'm going to listen to what's going on from within me and say something that I want to say as if nobody was watching, like something, I just want to make a musical statement. And taking it from that perspective, rather than going from outside in, go from inside out, it helps to actually make music. That's what I would say about that.
That's
great
great.
question and a great answer. I feel like I would just like lay a real fat ditto on that. You know, solos are different and they happen at different times and different places for different purposes. That feeling. Also, I feel like it's a diving board too. Like even in the studio, I didn't plan any solos. I don't think Nick did either. Michelle did kind of a solo at the end of a song, and she didn't plan it. She just did like 20 ferocious takes in a row to the point where we were all kind of terrified of her by the end of it. It was just like beastly. And then we kept one that was like ended up being the most musical, and also like her getting into that space of fearlessness. And so we got one moment of Michelle on the record that's like that, in a tune called Indigo. And it's happening during like a very written fiddle, like orchestral kind of fiddle solo, fiddle part, and where Michelle's like kind of drum soloing at the same time as the fiddle. And so we have that coming up. And but yeah, we kind of got in terms of solos, like yeah, we tried to keep that idea of the moment and the freedom, because like we don't want to do anything canned. You know, we want to have tightly arranged music, but we also want to be able to jump off that diving board, even if it's just for a 30-second solo. It's like, get into that headspace, put it out there. And I know it's possible to like express, like, you know, one of my favorite solos ever is Thundercat on a Flying Lotus track with Kendrick Lamar. It's Never Catch Me, and it's 10 seconds long. And I think it's my favorite solo of any guitar or bass solo. It happens at the peak of this like epic rap that Kendrick does, and he like basically like just brings it to this crazy intensity like he does, and then just drops off for a second. And Thundercat and his brother Ronald Bruner, who's like one of the craziest drummers ever, they're just basically riffing together over the top of all this like electronic synth stuff. And I don't know, he says so much in that 10 seconds that I'll still never even know. I tried to transcribe it, and it's like, it's just, you know, he got him across and like that. And so I'm inspired, like, you know, in the studio process, like, how do we shorten it? But live, it's like, how do we lengthen it? Like, how do we stretch this further? How do we really get to that space and stay there and build from there? And we have all the time in the world, because the audiences have been really sweet about like letting us be creative and improvising without judging our music as jammy or like out there. You know, it's like, I think they've taken us as a band that's serious and not just trying to like improvise like random like long spacey jams. Like, we're really trying to like play music in the purest form we can think of, but then like at the same time, like, how do we really want to come from that place when we're playing it? And I think that informs every moment of our show. If like we're all in like deep creative improv mode, it's going to inform the reiteration of a song that we know, and we're going to change our parts every time. I've never heard Jason or Michelle play the same thing twice exactly the way it goes. I've heard them play the same arrangement twice and kill it, but never like play the same exact notes in playing. And I think we all are on that boat.
Just as like a listener, like, I've always been sort of disappointed when I go to see bands multiple times and it's just, that's the thing. This is the thing that they do. It's like they've when I played in a lot of rock bands, that's how we would do it. We'd memorize every specific little piece of the set and we would just play it out, and that was it. And I think I maybe had like a negative opinion on like bands that were like a little more freeform, like a little bit more jammy at one point, because like a lot of bands don't do it very well, or they haven't really put in the work to get into that in the moment expression. And I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to explore this. This is like, I think it's really cool. I think about bass solo. I've never really been that hot on the concept of bass solos necessarily. And I think what this band has taught me is maybe I wasn't that hot on like how I was thinking about bass solos, my own conception of it. Because I think about it in a totally different way. It doesn't mean like, oh, it's a bass solo, it's time for me to like jump to the upper register of it and, you know, play like as fast as I can. It could be just like laying a new groove. It could be playing off of a melody that somebody else had referenced earlier. It could be setting up and like kind of setting the table for like the next, like the next thing that we're going to. So it's we have a lot of opportunities, and because there's so many ideas going through, there's always a new idea to elaborate on. So. And
you said you didn't really like bass solos, but you like whales.
I didn't like my bass solos. That's what I was figuring out.
Well, Jason, I really liked the way you said it, setting the table for the next part. And that, I mean, I haven't heard it in that way, and it just makes so much sense. And, you know, looking back at some of my favorite bands or sets, that's what's happening. You know, there's the solo, and it brings everybody, gets everybody ready for the next part. So I liked the way you said that. And I'm curious, I know it was mentioned earlier that you use an octave pedal. Yes. I'm assuming, maybe it's an incorrect assumption, that you're going higher?
No.
No, you go sub.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
We got some electronic drops going on in our music.
Yeah. The octave pedal I use is an Aguilar optimizer. It's kind of based on the old Boss OC2 design. It has a little bit more flexibility, and it has a little bit more like grit to it. It's like kind of like a dirty sounding octave pedal. And like when I'm thinking of it, it's at first it was so I could like use the upper register of the bass, and like where maybe it's a little bit more dexterous to play, not as many big shifts, and still get the low notes of the register. But I really like having those extra low notes, and it's something that I never. The double bass has like a mid-range, and the upright bass has like a mid-range presence. That's kind of what it's. A lot of a lot of upright bassists will like not go for those low notes. They'll want to cut off that whole like low sub frequencies, because that was what would make the instrument feed back. And once I figured out how to not get the instrument to feed back, it's very nice to be able to add, and like everybody will use an octave pedal sometimes. Thom will use an octave pedal, Nick will use an octave pedal, and he has a 5-string violin also. So he has a lot of low notes. So the whole band can just like shift low at once, which is not what I think people are expecting. Sometimes when they see, oh, it's a violin and an upright bass, and like, you know, these guys are gonna play like some like swing music or something. I don't know. I feel like, you know, but the old swing musicians were creative. I'm sure.
If they had octave pedals, they'd use them.
Yeah, Django would have had enough.
Sam Stewart.
Yep.
He would use a wah-wah bass if he lived in the '60s. Oh wait, he did. He didn't. Oh.
He did?
Oh.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
We've done like bluegrass nights and like bluegrass festivals and shows, and I'm always like, hey, you realize we're not bluegrass, right? And I'll like send them hard winds, and they're like, that's fine. And so we're like the random band that people think is a bluegrass band that shows up and doesn't play bluegrass.
Jason, I'm just curious. You mentioned that you finally solved how to avoid the feedback. If there's anybody out there who's an upright bass player dealing with that same thing, what's the secret sauce?
I would say it depends what you're going for. I think if you're going to go for a more acoustic sound and you need to play in a live setting, you need to get a good sound out of your instrument. It needs to start fundamentally with getting a good acoustic sound out of the bass. And that will help in a lot. Like if you're playing in a bluegrass band, like without a drummer, for example, like that, or with like a more acoustic oriented band, that will get you a lot of the way. If you want to play as loud as that, you need to kind of look to modern technology a little bit. The number one thing you can do is if you can see, Thom is holding up a piece of soundproofing. You can stuff up your
Yeah, this goes behind my bed.
But there's like a lot of little, but I think it's like having a good idea of what you're going for with sound. Like if you're gonna be loud past a certain point, like we could have the loudest sounding natural upright bass in the world, but it wouldn't sit well in this mix. It's finding other sounds to pull in. It could be the octave pedal, it could be the magnetic pickup, it could be using an amp that has a colored sound. Like when we did the recording, we used one of the old style like Ampeg B15, like the Motown amp, which had a little bit of that color to it. But I think like my advice would be, if you're getting past a certain point of volume, like start wondering like how you want to change your sound to fit into that thing. Because like at a certain point, acoustic instruments are going to be, you know, they're acoustic instruments. There's a place where they can get to without changing too much of the quality. And once you reach that point, you got to figure out, well, what do I like? What don't I like? This is when a lot of bass players will just start playing electric bass. I wanted to keep some of that upright bass sound and quality to it. And, you know, I'm still like working with multiple pickups and blending, and I'm trying to figure it out. This is this is a long process for me. And as I figure something else out, I have a new challenge or a new opportunity in it. So, I don't know, just, it's never over.
So switch to electric upright is what you're saying.
I do have an electric upright bass now, but that's honestly
a hybrid though.
Yeah.
It's a hybrid. It still has a body. It's not like an electric upright bass, like a stick bass. It's like it has a body to it. And
yeah.
This is very slim bass.
It's made by a company called GEL Luthery. It's by a guy named Gary Bartig. He's in Minnesota, and he's a proper, real deal violin luthier who has made these basses to solve some of these modern problems that we deal with and as double basses, which is, traveling with it, 1, and 2, just getting it still sounding good at an extremely high volume. Like I saw Modest Mouse play at Red Rocks, and they were using this bass. So if you can play it that loud in like that big of an outdoor amphitheater, like that's Gary deserves kudos for being on the edge of being able to figure out how do we keep these old instruments. The double bass is a 300-year-old instrument at least. So how to have this still provide low end to modern music.
Jason, are you using a microphone when you perform?
Never.
Or in the studio? Okay, just
never.
From the inputs.
I would like to use a microphone if it was like a quiet jazz gig in an acoustically designed space where everybody is going to be playing and trying to keep this natural sound. The Paesa pickup I'll blend in has a little bit more of that micro. It's kind of like, I guess, a contact mic in like the most basic sense of the word. But it's really the magnetic pickup that does the lifting for this band. Anyway.
Yeah, I have something to mention on that. When the band was a different format before, I would like have these resonator guitars for the street, but when we played live, I would always use a jazz box, and I would basically I installed in my acoustic guitars a neck pickup, a magnetic pickup always. So then at our gigs, I put a mic like an SM57 on it, and then also have that jazz pickup, and they would blend. It was kind of the same idea as the bass, because then it's acoustic guitar with no feedback that still sounds like an acoustic guitar, and it has all that fat, warm jazz sound. So when we went to record this album, I was using my PRS, which is what I play live, but I have my favorite guitar ever. This it's a handmade Japanese this builder named Ayers, but it's a guitar that this one builder made that I really love. It's like a giant. I don't know if you can tell that it's huge, but it's like a giant bodied jazz box, and it has such a good acoustic sound that like we actually for some of the harder electric songs, I still played this guitar, but with not with a mic on it. And then for the ones where I was doing more like rhythm and acoustic guitar, we have a song called Spare Me, and I wanted to get a brighter, real, more acoustic. Another song called Dog's Mind, where we put actually a mic on the guitar as well as a mic, or as well as the direct pickup. And that blend to me is a sweet spot. It sounds like it's the sweet spot for someone who wanted someone who's attached to playing upright bass with an acoustic sound, like you're saying too, like Jason, because it's like that blend. You maybe have two inputs going into one preamp, and then you can decide how acoustic do I want to be, how warm and fat. I'm getting feedback, turn the acoustic knob down, It just gives you so much control.
I think something I had to really work on when we started to get louder was I was never like a gear person. Like I would buy a bass I liked and I would play the bass. It was maybe this is like the punk rock in me a little bit, that I wasn't ever that interested in this aspect, or maybe I thought there was something untowards about thinking too much about equipment. And at this stage, I really have a new appreciation for everything that goes in to making high quality instruments and professional grade instruments. Because I don't know, maybe I need one now in a way I didn't a couple years back.
So I wanted to switch gears and kind of talk about some of the touring aspects of it, some of the business side of things, and how you're able to manage that and kind of take your own destiny in your own control. And
when I went to college, I studied, alongside performance, I studied music industry. So I think that's what gave me the confidence to get started with booking bands. I mean, even out of college, I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I'm just going to send emails. And I kind of learned as I went and just started sending emails and realized that, I mean, you can send emails to venues and they will respond to you, and then you can book shows, and it happens like that. And so as I realized that was something that was kind of like in my control, I just started doing it more and more and more. And Banshee Tree was really awesome for that. For the first time, I was in a band where they were all just full-time musicians. So they gave me 100% complete trust, and they were just like, if we're available. We ended up getting the spreadsheet. Nick put together a spreadsheet so that we could have blackout dates if any of us was going anywhere. But other than that, they just gave me full reign, and so that gave me the opportunity to really start learning how to book full-on tours. Because when you're booking tours, it makes it a lot easier when you don't have to work around schedules. Basically, our work schedule was all the schedule that I booked. So it became like we became a team in that way. And when you're booking a tour, you kind of need a few weeks on each side of potential, so that you can say it might end up here on the schedule, or it might end up here depending on what's available with the booking. So you need like a really wide range of time to work with. So Banshee Tree gave me the opportunity to have this time and ability to just be like, hey, you guys want to go on tour in California? And they're all just like, hell yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna book this tour that's like goes through the Northwest for 3 weeks. And they were just always on board. And on the road, more venues are willing to accept you. And through this, I learned how to negotiate and how to get us good deals and all that. So I love nerding out about it. And to me, it's like a puzzle to see how it comes together. Like, oh, I've got 4 anchor gigs spread out on 4 different states. Now, how do I fill in the spaces? And emailing all these places and just like watching this idea that was in my mind come into reality. And then we actually get to go on tour. So it's not like just about doing it. Then we actually get to go and see all these places. So through doing it, we just went bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's just really inspiring to be able to realize that you don't need to rely on somebody else to, like, you don't have to wait around for a manager to come and be like, or a booking agent, they accept you, now you're good enough to go on the road. It's like, if you believe in your music enough, you can just put yourself on the road, and all it takes is a venue to believe in you enough to book you. And, you don't need as much experience as I feel like a lot of people think you need to get started. What
are some of the tools that you've grown to really appreciate or like? And you mentioned a spreadsheet, not the most complex, but, do you have any strategies or tools or, nuggets for somebody else doing the same thing?
Yeah, totally. One really important thing is to follow up. So what I'll do if I want to play a certain city, so say we want to play Portland, we've never been to Portland. The database that I work with to find a lot of the venues is indieonthemove.com. It's indispensable for me. And so basically what I'll do, if we want to play Portland, I'll find all the venues in Portland. I will email literally every venue that fits our thing in Portland. And then I'll email all the small cities around Portland, all the little towns around Portland, in case we don't get exactly in Portland, we'll at least be close by. So I'll email like 15 venues for like one location. And then what I feel like is really important to stress is you need to follow up. So if you send one email and they don't write back to you, that doesn't mean they don't want you. It means they get a lot of emails. I'll resend them emails until we get one booked, and I'll stop doing all the rest of them. And I'll do this with a bunch of cities at once as I'm routing the tour. And, you know, the ones that actually come through is how it ends up coming together. But persistence is key. And also having your email set up so that it's very clear, like bullet points. Like, here's all of our websites. Here's a sentence of what we do. Here's some highlights from our this year's tours. Because if you have like 3 paragraphs, like we do this and we do that and we blah, 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 they're not going to read it. They're just going to be like, okay, next. So you just need to have it really short and simple, and you just have to be persistent and crap loads of emailing.
And is this copy and paste? Like, do you typically have like a template in Google Docs and you copy it over and change the header or the intro?
I have a template, and I individualize it for each venue, and not just like the name of the venue. Sometimes if it's the same sort of venue, I'll just change the name, but if it's for a festival, that's a different thing. Or if it's for a venue that's like really like a bigger venue versus a smaller venue, I'll change what I say. I'll change what I highlight based on the area that I'm booking. And also I'll try to get opening gigs for bigger bands a lot. And so that would be a different template that I usually will write those individual, like separate.
And do you reach out to the venues or the bands for those particular gigs?
Both, actually.
Okay.
I'll reach out to the venue and the band.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm curious, let's just talk about a quick example. We all live in Colorado, I believe. How did you guys get your foot in the door at Arise and you were able to play 3 sets? That I don't think some people are just trying to get in. So how'd you triple down?
We pound down all the doors. We're like, hey, you're gonna let us play.
We played the kids stage. Our friend Taylor, I kind of have to shout out to our friend Taylor, who basically, even before this year at Arise, before Michelle was even in the band, actually, I kind of wanted to start, Michelle. I wanted to tell the story because that's how I met you, or how you became in this band, actually, is via Arise. 3 years ago at Arise, the washboard player quit the band right before the festival, and we had won our band contest through this woman, Zoe Starwater, and Rainbow Lightning, this organization that sets up like kid stages at festivals across the country. And our friend Taylor, and Michelle's friend Taylor actually is a part of that. But anyway, we kind of knew this community and we won this band contest. So we were playing. At the end of the festival, I see Michelle, and I haven't seen her in years. I knew she moved to Colorado. And I thought she was just, super busy with her band, and I was super busy with mine. But I was at a standstill. Talked to her. She's like, I need a band. I was like, I need a drummer, like so desperately. Like, it's crazy. Like we hired a drummer that afternoon, and he's like the least hireable person ever because he's so busy. He's in 100 bands. And I was like, we'll never find a good drummer. And then Michelle was right there. But anyway, so we played that band contest, and then actually Michelle tried to get us in via booking contacts and stuff, but like you're saying, it is a tough festival to get into. Like there's so many bands that want to play, and there's so many bands that have a pre-existing relationship with the festival. So all we had was we won a band contest once, and so we actually ended up having to do that band contest again. And we did it, and we got in, and we were already in because we were going to play the children's stage. We agreed to that. We're like, well, if they won't let us in, we'll play on the kids stage. So Taylor helped us with that. So we were already going to the festival, and then we basically waited to see if we won this contest until like a few weeks before, and then we had the set. And I ended up I played on the children's stage a bunch that weekend. I did like a musical, like a performance of a musical. I played with Leftover Salmon for their encores on their late night set at Arise, and then we did like an improv. We did that late set on the Pirate stage, which was through Starwater, and we were like on the side at like 11 p.m. And that was my favorite part of the whole festival, is playing with these guys.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah, we basically pirated Arise this year. We found it in every back door that existed and infiltrated.
I really appreciate that you guys were humble enough to accept the position on the kids stage, and you kind of were able to get on the main stage with Leftover Salmon in the end, and really made it a great event.
Yeah, that's kind of how it worked out with Northwest String Summit too. We our friend does the kids stage like all over the country, and so she invited us to do this at Northwest String Summit. We were like, sure, let's do that, that's cool. And then it ended up, they did like this last minute new stage, and they reached out to us and asked us if we would be on the official festival. So it kind of like, it's good to be humble like that, because it opens up doors for other opportunities that you might not expect.
I have something about this that's just like, I think this illustrates really well. Music's a community. Like, the person who's doing the kids stage at Arise is the same person doing it at Northwest Springs in Oregon. Like, you know, the same people, you know, you meet them at just another community event in Boulder. Like, if you invest in your community, good things happen in that way. And if you, and that doesn't, and investing in your community doesn't mean asking everybody you know for gigs. It means just kind of being there and, you know, like developing like real well-rounded relationships, you know, like all these people who helped us with like Arise. Like, I would go to their events in Boulder that they would have just because they would have a cool music night on Wednesdays, and a lot of musicians would go there, and you know, you make a lot of friends doing that. And these people who are your friends, who, you know, people who you just wanted to hang out with on Wednesday, end up being people who can help you. And it's not like something you can really plan out. Well, I'm doing this, so I'll get this. It's like you're in the community, and then, you know, the community thinks of you when there's a chance. So, you know, just put yourself out there. And that doesn't just mean ask for things. Like, you know, go and listen and go and hang and, you know, like have a cup of coffee or beer or whatever you're into, whatever you enjoy, and just, you know, make friends, you know, like that's a benefit in and of itself. And this just worked out really well for us.
What advice would you give to a young musician starting out today?
Well, I guess staying on the same vein of what we've been talking about is to be humble and to be willing to learn from your peers and understand that everybody has something to teach you. And I think it's easy, especially as a new musician, to be intimidated by everything around you, but to remember that we're all just humans trying to figure it out. And so if you're open to learning from everyone around you, really being a good person, it's going to take you a lot further than just being talented at your instrument.
I think when you're in the starting out page, or like as a young musician, you don't realize that like how your influence is going to work out. Like us musicians who are like in our like early 30s, late 20s, like we're looking back at, like, I remember being that age and everything that I heard or saw was like really, really important to me when I was like maybe 13 playing in bands. And like any musical thing, any video I saw on YouTube or whatever, I still like remember that. And so like, yeah, I think no matter what step you are on the journey, just realize like the effect that you have on others, like you don't get to really control that, and it could go in any direction. So like Michelle's saying, please, like you gotta stay humble in it. And you also have to, the best actual like musical advice I ever got aside from that is to record yourself all the time. If you record yourself all the time, you know how you sound, and you give yourself the opportunity to get better. Otherwise, you're kind of just guessing. And so like I feel like that's the only way I've ever learned any instrument or learned to improve my songs or anything. And I don't need to like hire a producer to tell me my song is good or bad, or like how to change it, because I know I can just like get really intense about it and listen to it 10,000 times, try it 10,000 ways. And so like I feel like the more you record it, it just feeds into your skill set and like your ability to actually perform in the moment. too, because what you're listening to is your performance. And if you're concerned about the visual of your performance and you're like, dang, it's really hard for me to make eye contact with the camera, treat that like practicing a scale. Be like, oh, I'm gonna like sit here and make eye contact with the camera and talk and or whatever, and like this is practice or something, you know. So everything you could be doing, you could make into little exercises. Like sometimes I know like if my voice is too chunky or low on a recording, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sing it back like 10 times and shoot for like so airy and the exact opposite, to the point that it doesn't even sound good. And I'll do like a bunch of takes and listen to those, even though I don't want to sound that way. I just want to like push the bar this much so then I can retract back to the middle and have learned something. And I feel like that's what recording does for me all the time, is just gives me the cheat code to that, because I don't have to I don't necessarily need to hear that from others, because I think like with enough listening and critical thinking, I can come to a lot of similar conclusions that like the collective thought could come up with. And then when I get those opinions thrown in there too, it's like, I'm just not going to show them my recordings of me practicing.
I would say have ideas, like just on things. Like don't like it. This can be like having like musical ideas. This could be having practical ideas, how you're going to manage your band, how you're going to get on the road, how you're going to deal with hotels and food and just everything. Just like have an open mind and have ideas about things. I think before I started touring, I had all these perceptions of what touring was and what it needed to be. Like you needed a booking agent, you needed to make X amount of money, you needed to have a more important band in front of you on the bill, you needed to like wait for all these things to happen. And I think this is something that like this band has really taught me, is that, you know, you can make your own luck. And sometimes it's not going to be glamorous, like always. Like sometimes, you know, you're going to be playing a little show in a little town. And I was like, and you would think, wow, this isn't going to get us anywhere. We're spinning our gears. But if you have like faith in what you're doing, like we'll come back to those little towns 2 or 3 times. And we'll remember people, and they'll remember us, and more people will come out, or people will come again. And it's just being willing to do work and trust your instincts in ways. Like I think would be what I would say. And don't just follow what people are doing. Don't jump. Make music you want to make. Don't just follow trends. You know, if something seems a little weird, like, man, it's really weird to have a upright bass in a psychedelic rock band. Like, not everybody's doing that, you know? Like, instead of me trying to figure out, well, how am I going to, like, get this to fit into this model of what's going on? Well, this is actually something that's interesting about us. And you know, we talked about Tom Morello and his pedal earlier in the interview, and I read an interview with him when I was like, must have been like 12 or 13 in a guitar magazine, and he said, whatever is interesting about your playing, spend 15 minutes or 15 hours a day working on it. Like whatever you can do, you know. But you're just like the things that like make you as an instrumentalist or songwriter or anything you're doing, that's your equity as an artist in what you're doing, because that's the thing that you do, and that's what people are going to want you for. There's a lot of great musicians out there. There's so many great bands, but you know what's like makes it your band, and why should people care about what you're doing? You know, because maybe you care about what you're doing.
Well, before we wrap up, I want to make sure that all the listeners out there know about the new album. Maybe when they're listening, it's already out, where they could find it, where they could follow you guys, where they could reach out if they had a question or wanted to contact you guys somehow. What are the main networks that you guys use, and what are those links? We're
on Facebook and Instagram. Those are the social ones that we use. YouTube. Yeah, we have YouTube. You can reach out via either of those avenues. you can send an email to bansheetreemusic@gmail.com. Oh, and our music will be, Thom, you could better answer all the platforms that our album will be on.
Oh, it will, what we do is we'll release it on Bandcamp at the same time as it goes live on Spotify, all the like the commercial streaming services. At this time and the way the world is right now, I think we're going to be focusing on more of like kind of a donation-based approach. We might even, like, there's thoughts I have personally about like, how do we kind of like prolong this release? We're going to do a physical release, and maybe we do it only physical release for a while, and we don't put it on any streaming services for a little while. And then we just like, if we're still not gigging, maybe we'll be mailing people vinyl, and that will be our job, for a little while. On vinyl. So the album's going to be on vinyl. So when it's ready, we're going to be like, set up our merch shop. So you're going to be able to just reach out for us directly, and for fairly affordable. It's not going to be crazy expensive. We're going to really make it accessible, but that you can order the vinyl and we'll ship it to you. Or like if shows are happening again, you can come get it from us in person on one of our shows, and we'll draw doodles on it. So it's all going to come together is all I'm saying.
Nice. And then Banshee-tree.com, is that your website?
Yes.
All right.
At Banshee Tree on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, the last question is open-ended for you guys. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
It's a tough time for artists right now and people who like art. So, it'll be back. Hang in there.
Just love each other and care about each other right now. It's really important that we put good feelings out into the world. Music is something I think that's really good for people. So if you make music, make it. And if you're feeling hateful towards others, stop feeling hateful towards others. You have no reason.
Yeah, thank you guys for taking the time to chat and share everything and your music.
Of course. Yeah, and thank you for having us. This is wonderful.
Spare me, put me down like that. Cut me loose if what you need is living life without a blame. You forgot your place, where's the laughter ever after? Just standing in your way.
Listening to the Freio Music Podcast with Michael Morahan. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to share this podcast everywhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay tuned.